Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to, I guess, the first of many workshops we're going to have for our budget. And based on highlights, I think we're going to do okay, aren't we, Roy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yes. What do we have, Roy?
Okay, so let me stand up a little bit. Had too much lunch.
You're gonna love that.
So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, everybody's here. Fantastic. So let me start by thanking you. We're gonna have 6 or 7 meetings that will be anywhere from 8 to 12 hours total, maybe more, depending on how much we can accomplish in what we have scheduled. Let me start by telling you that the city of McAllen is in great shape. It really is. It's in such a great shape that it's a little scary, right? And I'm going to qualify that as we go through the budget. One of the things that I'm going to tell you is that our general fund is very healthy. It grew probably more than I'm used to seeing in the general fund, and you're going to see some of that in other funds, but specifically the general fund. We have to be able to be very disciplined. I think you've heard me say that coming into this fiscal year, because we've had so much money come in, so much influx of cash from the federal government, whether it was ARPA or CARES, which you all did a very, very good job of making sure that we identified expenses that were eligible. And for the most part, probably 99% of it is in capital. And so that's the thing to do with slugs of money like that. But also, you're going to see in sales tax revenue, in ad valorem tax revenue, and really every other revenue that we have. And so what you're going to hear me say a lot is that we have to be disciplined, because this rocket that we've been in is going to kind of land one of these days, and we're going to go back to some kind of normal. And we have to be prepared for it. And so one of the ways that you prepare for it is to ensure that you've got excess revenues versus expenses, and that you've got money in the bank. I don't think that we'll ever get, at least not this decade, to the point that we're going to have to take money from reserves. I don't think it's going to happen. But you are going to have, some kind of landing, and no more double-digit increases. While we have it, it's great. And what it's going to allow you to do is that when we finish this budget, like we've done multiple times in the last few years, is transfer out money for more capital improvements, right? And that is a luxury that you're not going to see, certainly nowhere in South Texas, and in fact in most of Texas you just don't see that. So congratulations to where we are. So let's look at the highlights of the budget. So by the way, we just received our tax roll at the end of last week, which is normal, right? It's usually the 4th week of July. Is Becky here? No. The 4th week of July. So we start the budget in April, and we really start hammering it in May and June. And this whole time, we're going with an estimate that we come up with based on our trends and what we see in construction and so on. And so last week, we finally got the tax roll, and we finished the calculation for taxes yesterday. And so you're actually going to get another cover page that we completed this morning. And so all cities go through that, right? It's not just McAllen. All cities go through that, and it makes it a little tough, but because of the experts that we have, we were in line with what we thought we were going to see. Other than we did see even a bigger jump than we thought. And so let me start with, we're going to propose this budget with the property tax rate reduction, and that's because of the incredible amount of construction that has gone on in McAllen, and the fact that the values in McAllen have gone up. And so we saw a tremendous increase in our footprint, which I'm going to show you in a minute, but this is a substantial property tax rate decrease. It's actually bigger than just last year's. If you recall, last year we had about a 1.6 cents reduction. This is over 2.5 cents reduction. And so, thank you. So, the next thing is that we've got a total of a $655 million budget. Obviously, we have a lot of projects in this budget, and so we are trying to estimate how much we'll spend in the current year. The rest of it we've got to move to next year, starting October the 1st. So it does total 655, and I'll show you that figure here in a minute. In capital projects and capital outlay, it's important that we identify both. It's $339 million. Some 280 million or so are actual construction projects, and the rest is capital outlay that the department's requested. That's equipment, vehicles, things like that, right? Capital outlay, not an actual project. But between the two, 339 million. That's bigger than most budgets in Texas. We do have compensation increases for all employees, as we've talked throughout the year. You've got two components in this budget right now. A 1.5% increase in pay for all non-civil service employees, which I'd like to have more discussion on later in the budget process. You've also got 2.5% for fire. As you know, they're under a 4-year contract that went 4%, 4%, and then 2.5%, 2.5%, and a 5% increase in police. And that's the contract that we just finished. And you're going to have 5%, 5, 3, and 3. And it also includes the longevity pay that we spoke of earlier in the year. So that is already in there. We'll show it to you in the budget, but it is included. It also includes 17 new employees that we're recommending we add. 11 of those employees are in the general fund. The general fund ending balance is $76.5 million as it is presented to you. Total of all funds in fund balances, we've got over $250,000 projected as a fund balance. Now, you know, I want to make sure that we understand what that number is. That's what we show where we will be if we expend all funds in all of this budget, which we probably won't, right?
$250 million.
$250 million. Oh, I said billion.
Yeah, you said
$250 million. In reality, we have $500 million in the bank, and so those are the two differences in those two numbers. Revenues over expenses. I'm happy to tell you that the last 3 years we've had record number of excess revenue in our budgets. 2 years ago, it was a record revenue over expense. Last year beat the year before, and this year beats last year. So even though our budgets are increasing the way they are, we continue to put more money in the bank. So that has a sign of great health. That 8.1 million of revenue over expense brings you 201 days of working capital. In the general fund, our policy is 140, so that's a lot of money. Funding of over $7 million of additional requests from the departments, which is something that we do, you know, every year. We have what we call a baseline, and then the departments tell us what their needs, wants, and desires are. So together, the department heads and ourselves, we go through the whole thing, and we're recommending $7 million of that. The request was $16 million above our baseline. The budget reflects about a $90 million worth of sales tax revenue. We've never hit $90 million in our history. 22 million of that going to the Development Corporation. And always remember that what the sales tax does for us is more than just give us this great fund to fund projects that increase our employment, but it also reduces your property tax. Okay, that is a direct reduction in property tax to the tune of 19%. And so we continue to fund the CIP through sales tax revenue from Insight. Very, very healthy amount of money going into CIP. And then in street maintenance, we continue to maintain about a $3.5 million maintenance project fund. So what I would say to that is what we've done twice in the last 10 years is that we've supplemented that amount of money that we put in the general fund from other funds. Sometimes I think it's been CIP and sometimes from Development Corp. We've plugged additional amount of money. Our position is that we don't need to do that, but if you do, then it's something that we can talk about. Those are the kinds of expenses that we can afford to make because it's one-time slug of money and it doesn't impact future operational costs. Any questions on those?
The 201 days, is that after you moved the 20-some million dollars for
Yes, sir.
the City Hall extension?
Yes, sir. So, I don't expect you to be able to see that, but it's in your packet.
Either up there or in the packet.
Okay. Let me tell you what it says. Okay, so you've got a bigger one. That's got all these numbers. If you look at 1, 2, 3, 4 columns from the right, those are the total appropriations for the entire city. I can read it. It starts in the general fund with almost $143 million of appropriations, and then you've got all of your funds, which, if you go through them, there are dozens and dozens of them, including hotel occupancy, hotel venue, development corp, special events, Christmas parade, EB5, parklands, Friends of Quinta, CDBG, Seas funds, downtown services, and so on. So the total appropriations, as I said in the highlight, is $654,597,000. And we're going to go through them the next several weeks. Okay. And so let me get it out of my hand.
That includes money in the bank?
No, that's strictly the budget. So on top of that 654, you have $500 million in the bank. So this is the 5-year summary. Total days of working capital. Working capital obviously is very important. You know, had it not been for what the federal government did the last 2 years, and I'm not a big fan of the federal government, but CARES funds and stimulus money definitely was something that cities needed. Who knows where we would have been had that not happened. There was a lot of anxiety and so on. So what you saw, and I'm going to show you a graph here in a minute, was that our working capital started going way up there. A combination of, you know, as soon as we got out of the pandemic in 2020, financially, I'm not talking about medically, I'm talking financially, between the money we were receiving from the feds and the fact that the city was doing so well, I mean, every year we're over 200 days of working capital. And so we're estimating that we'll be at 191 at the end of this fiscal year, September 30th. But again, it has to do with the $21 million that we took out earlier this year. And again, we're projecting 201. So again, this is in a graph, and it shows you how dramatic it was. And so, you know, it takes a lot of care to ensure that you're doing the right thing with that money. Because let me tell you, at TML meetings, at TCMA meetings that we've been, there was some real disasters going on in Texas, specifically on how money was spent that came from the federal government.
Did you hear of people having to return?
Yes,
money?
yeah, there was a lot of instances that money had to be returned, but worse than that, there was additions to operations that were budgeted with these slugs of money. For instance, Houston is a great example. Hired over 200 police officers with that money. And so you had that money for a year, 2 at best, and guess what? They still have 200 police officers with this money. And so now you gotta figure out how to fund it. So I always like this graph because these are our 2 major sources of revenue. The bottom line is, I mean, if you look back, we always go back 10 years. See how flat it was in 12? I say flat. It was probably still healthy, but compared to where we are right now, you can see that curve is concave, which means that you're really adding to your ad valorem footprint, and you're going to see why that graph is here in a minute. And so we've always talked about the fact that we want those lines to continue to get closer. As long as sales tax continues to increase, we want them to get closer because ad valorem revenue is much more stable than sales tax. And you can see the 2 graphs. It's easy to see. So the $66 million on the blue line represents what goes to the general fund for sales tax revenue. And so, you know, when the city of McAllen put its strategic plan together back in the early 2000s, even back then, they were talking about that last graph that I showed and the fact that sales tax revenue in the Rio Grande Valley was going to continue to have a disparity between the market share in McAllen in that day versus what it would be in the future. And so we acknowledged that, but we also knew that we had to keep working at making sure that our line kept going up. And so you see this here, you know, the red is taxable retail sales in Hidalgo County, and the blue is taxable retail sales in McAllen. And other than that dip in 2020 and in 17, you know, it's got some rise to it. Lately, it's been tremendous. But remember, this is just retail sales. There's a lot of other items that get taxed outside of retail. Which is
Roy, this says metro area.
Thank you, Caesar.
This is metro area in the red. Is it in the Rio Grande Valley or the metro?
It's Hidalgo County.
Hidalgo County.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's another graph of that. In 2004, we had 48% of the market, and now we're at 38%. So if you look at that in a vacuum, that looks bad, but it's not bad because we have continued to grow tremendously. So here's the tax rates. This should be on the front page in bold. Where's the monitor? I saw her walk in. Tomorrow, we're recommending that we set our rate at 0.4572. Last year, we dropped it to 4.799. The year before that, it was 4.956. And so again, I mean, the valuation has gone up. We're actually required, I say we're required, if you don't have an election, you're required to reduce it. We're recommending a further reduction than that. No, we'll show you that around. So this is what's required to be published by the state of Texas. That's what you're going to see in the media. And so what it tells you is that you're gaining $3.6 million in ad valorem revenue for almost a 7% increase in revenue from ad valorem tax. However, remember that you still are bound by 2.5% maximum to the existing structures. In other words, all of the residential and commercial that exists in McAllen, that valuation cannot go above 3.5% without a vote. So that means that there's a lot of construction going on, and a lot of value has gone up in the city, but again, restricted to 3.5%. So these numbers on the bottom is that mess that the legislature approved 2 sessions back with all these new words. So the property tax rate that we're recommending is right here, 45.72 versus 47.99 last year. Now they call this the no new revenue tax rate. That used to be called the effective tax rate. That basically means that if you bring in the exact amount of revenue through property taxes, you would have to drop it to 43.53. Then you've got a no new revenue M&O, which is 0.4011. And then you have the voter approved tax rate, which means if you're going to be above 45.97, you have to go to the citizens for approval. So it's 45.97. We're recommending 45.72. And then the debt rate is what we're required to have budgeted for all of the debt that we have. We will pay $4.8 million next year in debt payments. Any questions on those numbers?
So why don't we do the no new revenue tax rate?
No new,
The 0.4353.
We have a lot
because I'm
more,
not that conservative.
no, we have a lot more things going on. But if you look at the voter approval, we're still under what is required. So we could possibly go to 45.90, 96 and still do it, but we're still going to 45, 72.
Yeah.
So,
And at 4011, that means you've got the same amount of revenue, but you're adding 11 people to the general fund, including 15 officers that we added this year. Actually, not including the 15 officers that we added this year, so I would not recommend that. So that's the tax rate we used in the budget. If you go back,
Excuse me, the decision to, on the debt, I guess, total debt obligation for the city. We will reduce it, is that what you said?
no, so that 4.8 million is how much our debt payment is for next fiscal year. With all of the debt all of the obligations that we have, the total is $4.8 million. That's what we will pay in debt. Kind of like your house payment, right?
Yes.
In a year.
That's your debt service.
That's your debt service.
But, so that, in the bonds that we bought and issued and all that, whatever, those obligations total
Total
4.8?
4.8 million, right. And so the debt rate right here on the bottom, the 0392, that is how much of our total tax rate is used for that debt service.
Correct.
And you're required by state law to identify it.
A little under 4.
Right, 4 pennies,
Does debt obligation refer to principal and interest or just interest alone?
principal and interest.
I understand.
So here's a really cool graph, right? And it tells you why you've done what you've done with the tax rate the last 2 years. So let me see what we had over here. So we always go back 10 years, right? So even if you go back 10 years, our proposed property tax rate is lower than any year in the last 10 years. And here's why. And so look at this. So in 2013, the total valuation in the city was 7.3 billion, right? And then in 14, 7.3, in 15, 7.7. So 3 years it was in the sevens. And then in 16, 8.3, then 8.5, then 8.9. 3 years. And then 9.4, 9.6, 9.9. 3 years. Then 11.2, and then 12.6. And so it's a big number.
But that chart is really a function of what the appraisal district is doing.
That is the appraisal district. That number comes from the
But
appraisal
we
district.
know, without going into a lot of detail, that they kind of ran into some problems with the comptroller and they had to make some adjustments, correct?
They're always doing some kind of thing. I'll just say that.
All right.
So, those big numbers in the last 2 years is really pushing down our property tax rate. So, this gives you a graph of how we spend money in the city of McAllen. And obviously, anybody that wants to know what's important and what's priority looks at that graph, and that's where it is. So 50% of all of our all of our general fund goes to public safety. 100% of our ad valorem taxes goes to public safety. And then every other revenue helps us fund the rest of the city. General government, highways and streets, health and welfare, culture and recreation. Culture and recreation has always kind of been like number 2 in the city. What we've done is that we've added some departments to the general government, which I'm going to show in a minute. Because I don't like how general government sounds. That's the official name of it. But you'll see why that number is where it is. So street maintenance is really important in McAllen. Again, we talked about it earlier. It's always over 3 million, other than that 1 year in 2017, and that was because we couldn't spend the total amount of money, so we rolled it over for the next couple, and then we really saw a big increase in 2020. That was a slug of money that we put in there.
Well, this is the only meeting I'm gonna have to run out, but are we covering departments today or what are we doing?
No, the department will start
overview.
tomorrow.
Okay,
Just an
good.
overview of the whole thing.
Okay. This is for,
Okay. So, those are basically trends. We always like to go through that and show you where we're at. And here's the proposed budget in a very summarized manner. So in the general fund,
Yep, go. Go ahead.
we're starting with a unassigned beginning fund balance of $68 million. That's the number up here. You've got it in your bracket. Total revenues of $153 million. Total operation expenses, $142 million. And therefore, this line right here shows an excess of revenue over expenses of $8 million. And then, of course, 201 days of working capital. So the revenues come from taxes, obviously, licenses and permits, charges for services, fines and forfeits, investments, which got a pretty good number in there this year, and miscellaneous revenues. So I always show you this because, you know, the general fund is not only the biggest fund that we have, but it's what runs the city, right? And of course, we care very much about this because ad valorem taxes funds the general fund. Everything else is funded by something else. And so this is what impacts the tax rate. And in general government, as I said earlier, in city commission, special service, city manager, city secretary, audit, vitals, passport, municipal court, finance, budget, tax office, purchasing, city attorney, grants, HR, planning, IT, PIO, 311, city hall, building maintenance, and development center. And then in public safety, anything, and this is something that the state, like the TML, kind of recommends that you put under public safety. It's police, animal care, radio shop, fire, traffic, and building permits and inspections. And then, of course, highways and streets, health and welfare, and then culture and recreation, for the most part, is parks and recreation and our community centers. And the library.
Where is McAllen, McAllen Public Works?
I'm sorry?
Where's the Public Works?
Public Works is, right here, street maintenance, sidewalk construction, and drainage. Now sanitation, that's outside of the general fund.
Ah, here it is. I got it here.
So here are the rest of them. So when we talk about enterprise funds, that basically what we're saying is a fund that's, for the most part, self-sustaining. Sanitation, obviously, is one of the biggest funds that we have. Not as big as general fund, but it's a big fund. And it is self-sustaining. Golf course, convention center, performing arts, airport. Now transit and metro, they get revenue from the development corporation. That was part of the intent from the beginning of the development corp. And so that's almost on a yearly basis. And then the two international bridges obviously are self-sustaining. And then we have internal funds that basically, it's funds that help us operate the city, fleet and material management, general depreciation. Many cities don't even do that. Health insurance, retiree health, workers' comp, and insurance. Any questions on that? So total general fund revenues by source, 45% is sales tax. Pretty unusual for a Texas city. Property tax is 35%, and then you see those others that cumulatively, are significant. That's 10, 15, 18, that's 20%. So current property tax brings in about 55 million. Sales tax, 70. Charges for services, that's permitting, applications for zoning, things like that.
How
So
many franchises do we have that give us revenue?
I'm sorry?
How many franchises do we have that gives us revenue?
We've got a list of those. It's electricity.
Yeah, two, electricity, communications. And we have a like a franchise for right away now.
The communication, was that the AT&T, all, whatever? Are we gonna get some type of, report on the AT&T, whatever, the whole,
The small cells.
huh?
The small cells.
Yeah,
No.
You can.
and,
The lawsuit.
yeah, the report on that lawsuit and everything else.
Good. Got it?
And how much longer are they going to, be, changing cables and all that stuff?
We'll get a report to you.
Okay, thank you.
So on franchise, it's electric, natural gas, telephone, cable, cell network. Those are the franchises. By service, wait a minute, did I go through this? Yeah. So, service area, obviously 50% is public safety, general government, culture and recreation. Now, second line tells you that there's a $10 million increase in the general fund. That's what I'm saying that, you know, we've got to be cautious of adding really any more than that. Now, that does include a lot of capital outlay. And so, you know, we feel comfortable doing those one-time purchases because they won't be back next year. And that's a discretionary decision that we'll have, but nevertheless, it is a big increase in the general fund. Like I said, it does include 1.5% cost of living for non-civil service and 11 new employees.
Roy, on the 1.5 cost of living increase adjustment, that's part of the, I guess, the overall strategy that Jeff's been working on with regards to overtime, salary. That's what
Yes.
to give us, right?
Except that for this year, we showed a 3%,
Okay.
and we don't have it in there.
In years past, there's been like a one-time, I don't want to use a word, but like an additional one-time adjustment, thank you, adjustment. Do you anticipate in the next budget cycle, or even the next two budget cycles, to accommodate for that, or based on the strategy for cost of living adjustments, do we still continue on that path, or maybe a combination of both?
Yeah, I think that last is hopefully what we can do. I want to have that discussion during budget. There's a disparity between what we're doing for the non-civil service versus
Right.
fire and police.
Okay.
And you know, we always try to get that a little closer. And again, we did indicate that this year our goal was 3%. And it's, you know, we started with 1.5 because we saw this number right here, where we were in the budget. And in addition to that, we are going to have the longevity pay, right? And that, if this budget is approved, that's going to hit the first pay period in November at $175 per year of service. So for somebody that's got 10 years of service, we'll have $1,750 every time payment. So hopefully we can continue to find balance between those two things and where we are with that 1.5%.
What was it this year versus next year?
So you approved the plan this year, but it does not take effect until October the 1st.
Oh, okay.
And so the first payment doesn't happen until the first pay period in November.
Got it.
I see.
Here are the recommended new positions that we're recommending the city commission. Basically one each in municipal court, 2 in finance. A couple of things going on in finance. We've got a lot of things going on with all these projects going on. It impacts directly to the budget office, finance office, and purchasing. And you added people at purchasing during the mid-year review, and it has to do with how much work we've got going on. Not to mention that Sergio's got some pretty big turnover going on in his department right now. So we've got 1 in planning, a network administrator in IT, a fire captain. You actually heard that when we were going through the fire chief interviews. We're recommending that we add an admin fire captain. Traffic, we need help with admin. We've got a lot of technical people, but not so much at the office. And we're going to be making that transition to the new building soon. Building code, the fact that we've got so much construction going on, we need help in that department. Not to mention that we're behind on permits that were issued and either work never started or they never came back to see us. They got their hands full trying to catch up with that. And then in engineering and environmental health code, we're recommending them each. That's 11 in the general fund, and then these others on enterprise and composting, sanitation, that HEO level 2, the pro shop, golf carts, convention center, and risk. And so those 6 do not impact, again, general fund, which means it does not impact the tax rate.
Roy, on that first line on the municipal court, is that a full-time municipal court judge or an associate?
Associate.
It's an
right?
associate.
And we're probably it's gonna be the number 2 person, for Warren.
Oh, I see.
So when we go to the department, we'll discuss these
Right,
further.
yes, sir.
Okay.
So, getting out of the pandemic, a lot of things happened, right? Including our economy in McAllen just was busting at the seams. And so, we've been very cautious the last 3 years, maybe overly cautious, I'll take that blame. But there's a lot of requests from the departments, and it included $16 million additional money, and 50 new positions, which obviously I'm not recommending. And so I'm not suggesting that they're not needed, but you have to be able to incrementally take those positions on and ensuring that you've got the revenue to take care of it. And so, that first day of budget that we go through, or first 2 days, is very hard. It's really, really hard to be able to together decide what we can afford and what we can recommend to the city commission. And so I put this in there because you can't say yes to everything, right? If you do, it'd be a 14% increase to our budget, and you'd be in the hole by $3 million. So obviously, we're not going to do that. So it's a disciplined approach by all of us, really around this room, to come up with what we're recommending. We
So
did
the-
recommend
so the
6.9
request-
million out of the 16. Yes, sir?
Yeah, so the requested 50 positions, you put in the budget 11,
17. 11 in the general fund and 6 in the
Oh, I
rest.
see.
but you put, recommended 11 new positions on.
In the general fund, 11. It's this
In
one
the
right here,
gen-
John.
Huh?
It's this one right here. So 11 in the general
And six.
fund and then 6 in the other.
By the 50, 17.
Right.
But does the 50 reflect just general fund positions, or does it reflect?
No, all
All,
positions.
both, okay.
So we usually go through this, and you're going to hear some of it when we go through the departments, but these are we call them decision packages that we're recommending to the commission. And you've got them in your book. I suggest, and I always do this every year, go through it. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that we're recommending from every department. Some are small, some are not so small. I mean, $366, I think we don't have to account for that, but we do. Municipal court, finance, total of 103, budget 2,000, tax office 50, purchasing 35, and that's in addition to the positions that we added at mid-year. City attorney, grants, HR, we also added some positions at mid-year. Still, we're recommending 56,000. Contingency, that's the 1.5% cost of living. And remember, we also have a line item for fire and police, so that's outside of this number. Planning, 71,000. IT, where's Robert? So, every year, we try to figure out where to put Robert on the schedule, because we're always talking about big numbers, and you know, he and I have a lot of debates, but the truth of the matter is that it's a very important department in our city. You know, it's what takes care of us, it's what protects us. And so there's a lot of needs on a yearly basis. And so in IT, we're looking at $800,000 that we're recommending, and that's outside of some of the capital that we're going to recommend in other funds. McAllen 311 and City Hall. Building maintenance, 66,000. Development center, 30,000. And that, when we say development center, we're talking about the actual building. Police, there's your CBA, it's 1.4 million. That's an all-in number, benefits, everything. It's a big number. Police continues, so a total of $1.5 million of non-capital and capital and personnel. Animal care, radio shop, 173,000. Replacing a bunch of radios. Fire, we've got quite a bit of needs there. So we've got the new captain. We're increasing overtime because of their, their shift work. It impacts that overtime number. If somebody's out, got to bring somebody in. That person probably already worked the shift, so that impacts us. Total for fire that we're recommending is 1.3 million. And again, that's above the baseline. Traffic, 94,000. Building permits and inspections, 189,000. Engineering, 132,000. Street maintenance, small things. Sidewalk construction, 71,000. We're actually replacing a vehicle. It's not in here, but when you see vehicle shortage, that means we didn't have enough money in the depreciation fund, so we're having to fund it. And then mobile radios, drainage. That's a great department, pretty self-sufficient. Environmental health, total of 109,000. Our graffiti cleanup, 45,000. Park administration, parks. We're doing some changes to some of the existing employees that we have. We've got a crew leader that we're going to turn into a trades helper. 3 groundskeepers into trades helpers. They're more versatile, and so that helps that department. You've seen an increase in recommended employees in this department every year, probably the last 9 years. It's not happening this year. It's probably a discussion that we need to have further. There's a high expectation by the community in that department, and it's very visible. And so probably something that we need to look at. Maybe we look at it in a year.
Definitely.
Still, we're adding $351,000 to the department. Pools, 78,000. In the community centers, small stuff. Quinta Mazatlan, we continue to do things for the existing buildings. We're doing a little on compensation. And then we're replacing a bunch of the stuff that we need, chairs, carts, tables, really what makes Quinta work. And we're in need of new stuff. So
How did it do after the big storm?
There was some damage, mainly to the fauna, more than the building. But what else happened out there? Do you recall?
We had some damage to the building as well, but we're getting that taken care
Yeah.
of.
But is it this budget?
No, we're doing it under emergency repairs fund right now.
Okay, well, I mean, it needed to be done,
Yeah.
but I know that, it had to be worked, because I went over there right a week after or whatever, and, I mean, it had to be done delicately, because, it wasn't just trimming trees out there or whatever, so it was done that way. It looks good, I just didn't follow up too much.
Are you referring to the stucco wall?
No, I'm talking about
No.
the actual.
No.
But we got the building damage, where's the stuff?
Oh. A lot of trees up there.
The library, 117, Lark, Pondview. Then, what page is that? That's the same one, right? So capital projects, remember I differentiated between actual projects and capital outlay. So that's how much you'll be doing in construction. Convention center, 2.7. Infrastructure and improvement, that's still federal funds, that we've got projects projected to be completed. I want to highlight that City Hall expansion because we included it in there, but when we had our executive session the last time, I suggested that we use that money for other, and we can talk about that further. I won't say what, but you recall that. Traffic and drainage, 6 million. Airport, huge improvements at the airport, 44 million. Development Corporation, 12. Street improvements, 2.2. From the CIP, 12.8 million. Anzalduas, CIP, those are small projects, 648. Bridge CIP, which is the other bridge, 2.1. So we should have, Anzalduas on the other side. So Quinta, we've awarded the queue, so we've got $50+ million in there. Drainage fee has been our savior really through the years, $5.9 million. And again, that's kind of pay as you go, and we've been adding projects since we created the drainage fee. Parkland zones.
Was there a sunset on that or not?
What we are required to do is that we give you a report every year, and then every 5 years you have the opportunity to say something.
Not there yet.
CDBG 691, turn number 2A, 5.3. The parks facility and fire station, obviously we finished the fire station. That's not station 8, that was station 3, I think. No, that is station 8. In the park facility, we're about to do the ribbon cutting this month. So we're finished. PFC, that's the airport, 4 million. Bus terminal is the completion of the satellite, also on 3 Mile Line. And then the big one at Anzaldúa is $64 million.
That's for Jose's office. That's for his office.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
the
why-
third office.
He said, who's
Wait, what's Jose?
we got a fan of employee.
So what you're gonna see in the next few weeks is that we've added
first. You never
very
know.
few projects. Okay, and that was intentional for at least a couple of reasons. One is we've got so many projects going on, and we have to make sure that we can manage them, number one. And then number two, it'd be a good, I'm not gonna call it a pause because there's so much going on, but it'd be a good pause to catch up and allow fund balances to come back up. So in the Development Corporation, we've got a $19.5 million beginning fund balance. And we talk about this every year. It always looks like we're just gutting it, right? And it's because the projects that we put in there for capital are usually not complete in 1 year. So we move them over, and so you usually have a significant amount of expenditures. So $19 million fund balance, $23 million of total revenue, of which $22 million is from sales tax, half-cent sales tax, and then total expenditures of $35 million. A lot of it because we're moving projects from this fiscal year to next year. And we've got a whole day plan to go to the Development Corporation during budget process.
Roy, on the line where you have total resources, I'm sorry, the row where you have total resources, and you intersect that with a column that says adjusted budget, and you have 48,076,000, is that like what was actually realized? Or,
Right here?
right,
Right, so the beginning budget, when you adopted it last year, we had $44.9 million of expenditures. And so what that represents is budget amendments through the year. We went from 44.9 to 48.
Oh, I see what you
Either
mean.
projects that
Yes,
came
yes.
up or incentives or things
And
like
you had to
that.
do an ordinance to amend, okay.
And so the total resources, like you said, is 43. And then again, we're gonna go through all of the appropriations here probably next week. We've got transfers to general fund, sales tax debt fund, McAllen Express, another debt service, that local government is probably fixes it in hand, but we get reimbursed for the TERS. Transfer to McAllen Marketing,
It is? Okay.
and then that's it. Convention Center Fund, both the Convention Center and the Performing Arts is doing very well, really, really well. It wasn't that long ago that we're running in the red every year. And so we've got $8.9 million beginning fund balance in the Convention Center. We have a lot of activities, obviously, there. One you saw this past weekend. One of the big changes that we're doing here is we've always carried all of the personnel in the Convention Center, including everyone that works at the Performing Arts. And so Yahida, we asked Yahida to do an analysis of that, and we have it. We really are carrying about $1.5 million of personnel costs for the Performing Arts Center. So that's what you see right here. Where is it? Right here?
Management fees?
Right there, yeah. That management fee, that's what we call it, but it's basically personnel costs that are in the Performing Arts Center that were carried here. We went from 1.5 million last year to 2 million. I'm sorry, from 1 to 1.5. Okay, so that's what that management fee is. You'll see that drastic change. And it shows it as a revenue, and you'll see it as an expense in the Performing Arts. And then we're also seeing an increase in revenue for special events. They're just being very successful over there, and we're also including McAllen, which is a big deal. Last year we didn't have McAllen in here because it was a chamber event, and now we're showing it as a convention center.
You had much higher expectations for hot tags.
Yeah, yeah, because we're already seeing it. Where are you seeing that?
Well, I was looking at this year adjusted budget to your recommendation for next year. That's a significant jump. 1.8, 1.9 to about 2.6.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. We're actually already hitting that this year.
Roy, on this table here, the convention center, so is the revenue over and under expense, that negative 2.8, is that the number we're supposed to be looking at, or what's the bottom line number of, I guess, before transfers in and out, and that the convention center made? I mean, what's the actual number?
Well, we're looking at operating revenues of $6.2 million,
Mm-hmm.
and then other sources, which is the hot tax, right? And so that fund balance, even at the end of the year of $7 million, is probably the biggest we've seen in a long time. Projecting it for the end of the fiscal year. If you look back last year, we're at 4.5, and we're projecting we'll be at 7.
So with the hot tax, it helps to offset, right? But the convention center on its own doesn't make a profit, right? I mean, is that?
Yeah, so it's a nonprofit, and so our goal is never to make a profit.
Yeah.
However, the hot tax can be used really for 3 things: the convention center, marketing, and the chamber. And so that's it. And so you have to take advantage of that. In fact, on the next one, on the Performing Arts Center, that gets funded through the venue tax. And in the venue tax, that's the only place that you can use it. And so, it makes the fund very, very healthy. So the next one is the Performing Arts. We're starting with about 3.3 million, ending at 2.7. And again, one of the reasons is that we're increasing that transfer or personnel costs. Well, that's embedded in the 2.5. Yeah, so on the operating expenses, you'll see the first line, 2.486 million. That includes the 1.5 for personnel being paid to the convention center.
Can you point that out again?
Sure, it's right here.
Oh, I see.
So both funds are doing really well. And again, I'll show you the balance of that hotel occupancy tax here in a minute. So we've got total revenues of 1.3 million. And total expenses of 3.2.
Going back, I'm sorry. On the operating expenses is from 1.9 to 2.5. It's half a million?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because of the personnel that we carry. Right?
Right. And we're gonna have obviously a Ida come in and present on both. So here's where the money comes from. This is an in and out fund. We do not attempt to keep money in there. As you can see, 387 fund balance, $387. We're projecting 4.7 million because our estimate right now for the hot tax is almost 4.7 million right now for this fiscal year. So we're using that number for next year. That's why the dramatic increase in revenue projection. You have a... Yeah, we're estimating 4,721,000 this year.
Have we looked at the last maybe few months to see if there's been any, let's say, decreases or, I guess what I've heard is that there's been some slowing in that industry in our city, but I don't know if we've quantified that.
We track it monthly. I mean, we look at every single number having to do with hotel occupancy, and from a lot of angles, the chamber, ourselves, the hoteliers. Rebecca has a lot of communication with them, so
Okay.
yeah, we feel pretty
As long
good.
as it's a conservative number, I think
Yeah.
we'll be fine.
Yeah, last year, the actual revenue was 4.7 million
Okay.
last fiscal year.
But
We'll be close.
But we had budgeted 3.6,
Right.
so that's why you're budgeting the 4 point.
Yeah, because now it's 2 years in a row that it's hitting that number, so we feel good about increasing it.
I get it.
And we're not
Okay.
too concerned with government because we don't get that anyway, right?
Let's see, anything else in here? Okay, so this is the hotel occupancy tax, right? So the convention center receives a 2.579, performing arts 645. We put $200,000 towards the marketing fund, and then the $100,000 for overtime during the parade. And then on the bottom, you see how we split the 7 cents. The Chamber of Commerce gets 2, Convention Center 4, Performing Arts 1. And that's consistent every year.
We're still doing the overtime?
Hey, you wanna do more or what?
No, I thought that was already passed, never mind.
We can take a look at it.
Video tax, again.
Thanks for acknowledging that comment.
Sure, we'll look at it just a second. So the venue tax, again, that one you can use for 2 things. Debt service on the Performing Arts Center and operations. And that was an actual election that we had in the city of McAllen.
But this is still from the hotel.
Yeah,
occupancy.
that's an additional, 2 pennies? An additional 2 pennies.
Okay.
So the traditional is 7%, we charge 9.
No, right.
So, let's see. We've got the geo debt service, going out from there, and that's when we built the Performing Arts Center. And,
Yeah, that's that
and
now.
then to the Performing Arts Center operating fund. Airport. You're starting to see that, our cash is coming down because the federal funds that we receive. And so all of that federal funds that we receive, we use for capital projects. We're starting with a beginning working capital of $18 million. And a lot of projects in there, bringing down the fund balance to 10.5, which is still higher than most other years. So that in the revenues includes landing fees, terminal area, boarding bridge fees, parking. Actually, parking does very well at the airport. Rental cars, let's see, parking brings in $1.593 million.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. Yeah. I don't park there. Interest, $500,000. I can't beat it.
A little good one helps.
And then, of course, we get a little chunk of change to the general fund, and the FAA allows that, $2.1 million. Thank you, Liz.
I'm sorry, exceeded my comments.
7, no? So we increased it this year to the general fund to 2.1 million. Any questions, sir? Toll bridge. So this is the Hidalgo Bridge. As you can see, it does very, very well. Over $11 million of projected revenues. We also have rentals in the building of $2.5 million. That's not chump change. And basically, this is an in and out fund. In fact, in the next bridge meeting, we're going to recommend that we reimburse the city of McAllen for last fiscal year's debt service. Ansel Lewis has actually gotten to the point where it's making enough money to make some debt payments. It didn't used to. We used to get it from Hidalgo Bridge. So because of that, we're gonna be seeing increases to the transfers to the general fund. That's before truck traffic, so that's really good news. Okay, so let me tell you the breakdown. So the city of Hidalgo gets $3.2 million out of the bridge. And next year, the city of McAllen will receive $5.7 million out of the bridge. Ansel Lewis, about $4.5 million in toll revenue. We got a little bit of southbound commercial traffic in there on the empty trucks. And then if you look at, I'm sorry?
$500,000?
Yep. And then if you look at debt service A and B, we're budgeting for that. And also for, well, let me start with that. So those are the debt services that Ansel Lewis is now able to pay. And so that's going to continue to increase the disbursements. That is a big deal. That's a small fund. That CIP is basically funded through 50 cents out of every toll that the city's been doing for a long time. And we're able to do small projects with it. That's the actual port of entry. Call it the Ansel Lewis Cargo Fund. And so we're looking to, we've got $66 million budgeted for next year, that means that the balance of that, we're estimating we're gonna be spending the current year. And so whatever we don't spend, obviously, will be moved over.
So how do you establish the initial working capital, the top line?
That was money that we received from TxDOT and the grant
Oh, that's
and the loan. There's 3 funding sources for this project. It's TxDOT, 22 million.
yeah, you have it right under there on revenues, right?
Oh, yeah, right here.
Yeah.
And NatBank, we borrowed 63. We're not gonna need it all. We're probably gonna send back 20 million or so.
But you don't have any of it recommended to fund next year, do you? How does that work?
Right.
It's in the beginning working capital.
Oh, it's up here.
Oh, okay, it's
Yeah.
okay, that's what, I think that's what I was getting mixed up. Okay,
But we're sending it back because we've got the $25 million.
Right.
Right.
In fact, we're estimating it'll be that, right? There would be no further
yeah.
change orders, it'd be that, but
Yep.
I'm sure there will be. The PEG fund, as you recall, it's very restricted what you can use this for. It has to be expenses for our ability to broadcast city commission meetings. And so we'll have a breakdown on that as we go through the budget. It's actually got a very healthy fund balance. Drainage fee, again, as money comes in, we project projects. And I'm happy to say, we were just at the city commission last Monday. 2 of the projects that we talked about are in here, the Balboa Acre Stormwater and Balboa Ditch Streetscape. And we're looking to try to add a 3rd one for this fiscal year, and Eduardo's working on that. But
In this-
nevertheless, we're delivering.
In this district, in this area.
Yes, exactly. And then further south in the trade zone, we've got a pump station, which is that last one right there. CIP fund, we'll go through that also. Those are capital projects. We've got $6.8 million. We expect to spend it all.
Tony raised that question. Oh, I'm sorry. You already went ahead.
Go ahead.
I was still back on the drainage fee. So does it sunset next fiscal year?
I'll have to look at the
Can you look at
schedule,
that?
Commissioner. Yeah.
Because I recall just right before, or the time we were kickstarting the big drainage projects, we did the general obligation, and then we passed the ordinance around that time. And so I do the quick math, if it's May 2018, 5 years.
But the engineering department brings you a report every year.
Okay.
That's also part of
Yeah.
the ordinance that we have.
To me, it's one that we need to keep.
I agree.
Oh, yeah. We still got a ways to go.
So traffic and drainage, this is the bond fund. We're gonna project about $3.5 million left at the end of the year, which means that by the following fiscal year, we should be complete with all of those projects. Really, it's drainage, traffic is finished. And so, I have to commend the staff. When we passed the bond issue, we talked about an 8-year duration for us to plan, design, and construct. And if we do finish it next year, it'll be 7 years. The Parks facility is the building that we're about to open. Obviously, we're gonna finish, and therefore, we've got very little budgeted to finish the project. This is the ARPA funds. We will go through them again. All of that has been allocated to the city commission. And you voted on it. We could change it if you'd like, but we've got those projects moving along pretty fast. Total expenditures of $22 million. The health insurance fund, we just had a presentation a month and a half ago or so. So this reflects all of your action. And this is a fund that just continues to increase. I mean, that's everywhere, statewide, nationwide.
we're gonna have a good session on that later?
We can, you actually had it about a month ago, but we can certainly bring some highlights. And then agencies is something that you're going to have to vote on. We'll have that as part of one of our sessions here. The Development Corporation met last week and made these recommendations. Comfort House, MEDC, Lift, South Texas College, Affordable Homes, Vida, Lower Rio Grande Valley Community, and Milagro, and then Boys and Girls Club. And then we've got agencies that have recommendations in the general fund. Amigos del Valle, Comfort House, Museum of South Texas, Mujeres Unidas, McAllen Town Band. Really? Thought I didn't recommend it. Okay. OGV Literacy Center, Valley Symphony, Chamber of Commerce, Boys and Girls Club,
I know.
IMAS, and McAllen Heritage Center. And so we'll have a session where we'll vote on every one of those lines. That's always fun.
There's no increase in any.
It's pretty balanced. It's real close to what they got last year. And we'll talk about other outstanding issues as we move forward. We're trying to get you out for night out with PD. And then tomorrow we've got, what do we call it? Thanking reception from VSO. It's for you. So we're probably going to go a little longer tomorrow, but that's all we have today. That's an overview of all the funds, major funds. We're in good shape. So we'll answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Do we have anything under executive session?
The South Texas College Award, that's for what?
Yeah, the South Texas College is the training that is specifically done for companies in McAllen, and for the most part, companies that are brought in through MEDC.
Skill training.
No, yeah, the nursing home.
Any questions?
Anything else?
That's all we have.
All right, there being no further business, this workshop is adjourned.
Thanks, sir.